What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Gold Standard podcast production. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. He's Vish Kumar. And what's up, Vish?
What is up, Rob? Look at me. I'm here for the intro.
Yeah.
Finally.
Woo!
Finally.
How about that? I guess a broken clock is right twice a day. We're going to get into winners and losers from the 49ers 2023 draft class. We're going to get into something Adam Peters said after the draft was over that caught our attention, and one thing you wished Kyle Shanahan was asked about now that reporters actually had a chance to speak with him. But before we get into all that, I want to remind you, please rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network. If you take the time to leave a review, we'll read it on the show. This one comes from KT Pet, 5 stars. Delay of game is the subject. As a former official in high school, I appreciate the Under Review podcast for the knowledge and their willingness to listen to their fans. So there you go. One happy customer. And just started today, Vish, YouTube channel memberships here on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. So you sign up to be a member, you'll get custom emojis, you'll get membership badges, you'll get priority comment response. So please.
Priority comment response. Wow.
That's right. It's like priority boarding at an airport. You get called up first. So please sign up for that. We always appreciate all the support. All right.
Yeah. I haven't even done members on my channel yet. I that's crazy. You're already moving ahead of me. I don't want to do the members because I never know really what perks I can provide to them. And it's like, hey, let me take your money so you can do this and support me. And then I'm not going to do anything for you. So I don't want to be doing that. But look at you, Rob. Look at you with the Gold Standard Network.
Can't just sit on your hands. You got to offer things to people. And let's offer some analysis on this draft because it's officially in the books. Finally, we know the names, and we thought we should do some winners and losers as opposed to, just draft grading each pick, because you and I are not breaking down the college film of D. Winters as excited as we are to have him on the team. So we want to be honest with people. But I think there are some winners and losers that we can talk about here. And my first winner, I don't know how you feel, Vish, but I got to go with Colton McKibbetts. I mean, he's given the right tackle job, and the Niners have 11 picks, and they didn't spend a single draft pick on an offensive lineman, let alone a right tackle. So not only did the 49ers talk the talk about praising him and talking him up all offseason, but when it came down to it, they didn't draft a tackle, so they clearly believe in him.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I expected. I've actually, you mentioned broken clock is right twice a day. Hey, I was right about one, which was coming on time. And then 2, I've been kind of right about everything that's been going on with Colton McKibbetts this offseason. I predicted in March that he would get an extension to his last year of his restricted free agent contract. In fact, I think I said it on this show a couple of times with you that I thought he would get an extension, the similar thing they did with Emmanuel Moseley. I wouldn't be shocked if they tried doing the same thing with Juwan Jennings and he said no because he knows what kind of money he might get in that market next year. And so I guess that they would do that. And then I felt like, look, when you're looking at where they're drafting in the 3rd round and you look at the available tackles in free agency, and I've talked about this for so long and it feels like such a redundant topic because people don't let it go. Offensive line play sucks across the NFL. There's not good ones coming in. There's not good ones in the NFL. Very few teams have 2 good offensive linemen. You're going to be hard-pressed drafting a guy and saying that guy is going to come in and beat out Colton McKibbetts regardless of what you think of Colton McKibbetts week 1. And so because of that, it was always a numbers game. And I felt like for the Niners to draft an offensive lineman, they had to be sure, or to use John Lynch's word, convicted that that guy was going to be able to not only make the roster, but be a day one contributor. They keep 7 offensive linemen, Rob, that are usually on the active roster. We assume the 5 starters will be Williams, Banks, Brendel, Burford, and McKibbetts. That leaves 2 offensive linemen available on game day. John Feliciano will likely be one for sure. And then the other one has to be a guy with complete positional versatility. And right now, to me, that's Nick Zakelj, because John Lynch said they look at him as a guy that's capable of playing all 5 offensive line positions. He has to be a swing tackle as well. So therefore, it was always going to be a steep climb for them to draft an offensive lineman because they had to be sure that that guy was going to not only make the roster, but contribute. And so I understand why they didn't go in that direction, and I understand why they have that belief in Colton McKibbetts. I don't know if it's necessarily a, hey, we think Colton McKibbetts is a star tackle. It's just a, hey, Colton McKibbetts is the best of our financial situation in our draft situation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But he has to meet sort of a minimum threshold of performance that they think he's capable of in order for them to go forward with this plan. Boatswain Boogie 03 says, damn good draft, 5-star podcast. Thank you very much. We appreciate the support. Yeah, I think that McKibbetts is going to be fine. I think he's going to be similar to Mike McGlinchey. I think he'll be better in the run blocking game than the pass blocking game. I think that the scary thing, I think, is the quote unquote must pass situations, which were scary with McGlinchey too, because every team is going to move their best pass rusher right on him.
Let's be honest. It's scary for this football team in general. I was asked 2 years ago by John Chapman what I thought the biggest worry about the 49ers was when they drafted Trey Lance. And I've been steadfast that their biggest issue is the drop back pass game. It's not just that they don't have quarterbacks that are, built to just be drop back passers like Mahomes, where they drop back 30, 40 times. It's also that they don't have the receivers that just generally you line them up on the outside and they're just killing man coverage and they're killing zone coverage and you're just going to throw the ball 50 times. They don't have the offensive line built for that, and they don't have the scheme built for that either. And so it was always going to be an issue. I think it's an issue regardless of who's playing right tackle.
That's fair, and their entire game plan is set up to avoid straight drop back passing situations. That's the number one thing they don't want to have to do, regardless of the opponent, regardless of the game script. So I did have Colton McKibbetts there as a winner. He's got to feel better after the draft than he felt going into it. You think that's fair?
Oh, 100%. 100%. He is a winner because he's about to be a starting right tackle on a team with Super Bowl aspirations in the NFL. If you're a starter on a Super Bowl team, are you not a winner?
Yeah, that's a good point. My next winner, it's pretty obvious, is Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, literally, the man thought he was going to get traded, and I think that there was a good chance of that. I mean, John Lynch saying before the draft, well, let's wait till we get through the draft before we announce the fifth-year option. I always thought that was a little fishy. I always thought that, because he could have just said, hey, we're going to pick up his fifth-year option. Like, he didn't have to say, let's get through the draft. And then when you add to that the fact that Aiyuk tweeted himself, hey, my agent called me in the morning and I thought I was getting drafted, that shows to me that his sort of status on the team was a little bit tenuous. It wasn't, a no doubt situation. I think if there were a chance that the Niners could have moved up into the first round of the draft, welcome back, Vish.
Unreal, man. Unreal.
I covered for you seamlessly, by the way. I was just saying, Lynch comment that, well, let's get through the draft before we talk about the fifth-year option, combined with Brandon Aiyuk himself tweeting, I thought I was getting traded. That shows that his status was not locked in, that it was tenuous there. And the fact that they got through the draft and there's no real threat to Brandon Aiyuk anywhere among the draft picks, to me shows he's going to be there with the team at least through this year. And that's good for Brandon Aiyuk because he's going to be in a position to succeed, because I think he's going to have a better year with Brock or Trey than he's ever had with Jimmy Garoppolo.
I agree with the second part of your statement, that he's going to have a better year with Brock, Trey, or Sam Darnold than he's ever had with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I don't think he's a winner. I think a winning offseason for Brandon Aiyuk includes a contract extension. And I think that's something he's not going to be granted this offseason. And so I don't think by not being traded and having his fifth-year option picked up, I don't think he's a winner, because everything he's done in the NFL has shown that he deserves to have his fifth-year option picked up. And he should be, on his fourth season with the team that drafted him, because he's produced that way. So I don't think he's won anything from the standpoint of they didn't trade him. Because, in fact, if they did trade him, Rob, he might have been put in a situation that he might have been featured more, and he might have had more stats, and he might have gotten paid more money. And right now, with him, money is going to be a very, very big point of contention, because the difference between Brandon Aiyuk and every other skill player on the 49ers when they have come to contract negotiations is every one of those guys walked into the contract negotiation with a first-team All-Pro, and it was still contentious. Nick Bosa is going to negotiate with on the back half of a first-team, or on the back end of a first-team All-Pro year. Deebo Samuel, first-team All-Pro. George Kittle, first-team All-Pro. Trent Williams, first team All-Pro. Fred Warner, first team All-Pro. The only one that didn't do it was Eric Armstead, and Eric Armstead was absolute free agent. And so in terms of Brandon Aiyuk's situation, I think there's going to be a big difference in the kind of money that the Niners might look to pay him and the kind of money he thinks he deserves. He might look at himself as a top of the market player, regardless of what his stats show. And the Niners might look at the production and say, Brandon, we can't pay you that kind of money because Deebo Samuel got $25 million because he had one of the greatest seasons ever to get that money. And you haven't done that. You had barely 1,000 yards. So I don't think Brandon Aiyuk is really a winner in this situation. I think Niners fans, as Nick Ellert says in the comment sections, are winners that Brandon Aiyuk's staying because he's an awesome football player. But I don't think Brandon Aiyuk won.
That's an interesting take that I'm going to respond to in a second. Just want to give Diego Figueroa a shout out. Quite possibly our first member on the channel. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir. Hope everybody follows suit. We get a lot of members here on the channel. The Aiyuk thing is interesting to me because I think that he could have got traded to a better situation. That's totally fair. But I also think that he's going to be in a position now to put up more numbers than he ever would have put up in his Niners career because of the quarterback situation now. To me, I think after last year, he's established himself as the best receiver on the team. I really think he is. When you factor in availability, you factor in route running, you factor in consistency, I feel like he's the best receiver on the team. And the Niners,
I don't go there. Deebo Samuel had 1,400 receiving yards in a season that he played wide receiver for half of it.
Yeah. But you know what? His floor is lower too. There were times where Deebo, I mean, he was a ghost on this
Deebo
team.
Samuel still had a better playoffs coming off of an injury where his body was bent over his leg like like a pretzel, and he still had 100-yard games in the playoff. He still had a 100-yard game in the playoffs, which is something we didn't get from Brandon Aiyuk. Look, I think Brandon Aiyuk is an awesome player. I would pay Brandon Aiyuk because I think the difference between Brandon Aiyuk and every one of those guys I just named is Brandon Aiyuk is ascending. And the rest of those guys, I felt like they signed their contract on the back half of what was possibly their best season in the NFL statistically. And I think the fact that he's ascending is a bigger reason to probably pay him than those other guys. But Rob, in terms of production, and when we're just looking at the production and we say, well, pay Brandon Aiyuk top of the line money, or he's a number one wide receiver. Number one wide receivers produce regardless of what their quarterback situation is, regardless of what's going on around them, regardless of what's happening. And he is yet to do that. And then I also think with Brandon Aiyuk, because he is such a good player that sample size limits his production, I think we all agree with that. We kind of sometimes, look at my mic, it's already upset with me. We kind of sometimes don't talk about, hey, Brandon Aiyuk has a few key drops.
Yes, he does.
Every season, every game. And when we're talking about a number one wide receiver, what's the moment for Brandon Aiyuk? Hey, that game, Brandon Aiyuk took over. He was that guy in that game. He had 150 yards receiving, and they won that game because Brandon Aiyuk played really well. You can name like 5 of those games for George Kittle. You can name 5 of those games for Deebo Samuel. You can name 2 or 3 of those games for Christian McCaffrey, and he was there for 10 games. What's that game for Brandon Aiyuk?
Well, that is fair, but also I feel like he's been their number one target in the red zone, especially this past season. He was the man in the red zone. I don't think it was Aiyuk. Kittle came on at the end of the year, yes, but Aiyuk was roasting people in the red zone early in the year.
I agree. This is not what I think of him as a player. It's just what I think, looking at the situation, his production relative to his peers that got paid. I think he should be paid. He's an awesome football player, and he's ascending.
Yeah, I don't know that I would pay him, but I think for him personally, he's in a good position because he also, Vish, could have got traded to a worse spot, right? With less people around him. So the trade thing goes either way. He could have got traded to a better spot, but he could have got traded to a worse spot. Greatness 54, welcome. New YouTube member on the channel. Greatly appreciate that. So, all right, that's interesting. You don't put Aiyuk in the winner's spot. I do. Do you have a draft winner for us?
Yeah, some people are saying the Bengals game because he had the game-winning touchdown. Didn't George Kittle have like 14 catches for 160 yards in that game? Like, what are we talking about?
I mean, see, yeah, I agree. I don't think he has like the monster. He dominated this game, but I feel like I can go back and pick out like individual.
What's his moment though? What's his moment? Hey, 3rd and 7, Niners got to have it. I remember the Titans game, 3rd and 8, right? Deebo Samuel got to have it. 3rd and 8, throw a little square into Deebo Samuel, and he takes it, 60 yards? Gets them down in like the red zone.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I'm not saying Deebo Samuel's a bad player, but I'm saying Deebo like disappears sometimes. For a guy that reaches the heights that he reaches, his floor is also way lower.
Look, he had a down year. I think there's no doubt about that. But I think too many people are writing off the conversation based on one down year he's had. And if you look at him, he had a down year in 2020, and we saw what he did in 2021. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt this year, Rob, before I say, hey, he's not the number one receiving option on this offense. Because even his rookie year, the second half of his rookie year, he was the best. No, George Kittle was 100%, but he was the best wide receiver on the team. Even though the Emmanuel Sanders impact was fantastic, the Emmanuel Sanders impact, Deebo Samuel was outperforming and outproducing him through the second half of the year when they traded for him. So, yeah.
Jose Batista says Deebo's got to get in shape. That's a little mean, but there's also a little truth to it. Stephen Duckett, thank you very much. Welcome to the YouTube member family. Appreciate that. All right, who's your first winner, Vish?
My biggest winner of this draft is the kicker position.
Ooh. Okay, I was gonna put Jake Moody in the loser spot. Why do you have a kicker position in the winner spot?
He got drafted in the 3rd round, man. That's a ridiculous contract for a kicker in their first year. Come on.
Well, that's true. So Vish has Jake Moody in there. I was going to say he's in the loser spot. And the reason is there is so much pressure on Jake Moody now because of where he's drafted. And there's always pressure on rookie kickers when they come in. But this is even more so, right? And look, we saw what happened with Roberto Aguayo with the Buccaneers.
Right.
He was picked in the 2nd round. He was getting heckled in training camp. Guys were screaming out, "You can do it!" And it was messing with him. And he never recovered. It was too much for him. And
look,
Jake Moody's.
If you're the 49ers, I don't think that's a Jake Moody problem, though. That's a 49ers problem. They better be sure of the character of the player before they draft him. The mental fortitude of the player to deal with the criticism that comes with being a kicker. Being a kicker is a thankless job. You get credit. You never get credit, actually. You only get the blame when you fail to make the kick. Unless you're Robbie Gould, then you're just assigning credit to yourself constantly. But, generally you don't get credit when you do well, and you get all the blame when you do well. So I think for Jake Moody, the position he's in, he's a big winner. For the 49ers, yeah, they created unwanted pressure on a player, but they've done that before. They did that to Javon Kinlaw when they drafted him with basically the same pick that they traded for DeForest Buckner, and then they handed him number 99. Like, look, he's our exact replacement for that guy. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was dicey. I always say the 2 jobs where you have to be perfect are barber and surgeon. Well, you can add kicker to that right now because Jake Moody's going to have to be perfect. I actually had him in the loser category because of all the pressure that he's going to be under. Going back to our last point about Brandon Aiyuk, Sean, thank you for the super chat. BA is a better receiver, hands down. Christian McCaffrey's is a better receiver than Deebo, and he's a one-trick pony with the screens and slants. Doesn't win outside or deep. Gadget guy. Sorry, Vish.
Well, I do agree Christian McCaffrey is better than Deebo. I think Christian McCaffrey is the best route runner on this football team. Brandon Aiyuk is a better receiver, hands down. I mean, last year, yes, Deebo Samuel had a very down year, but winning outside and deep, he did do that in 2021 quite decently.
Early on.
Yeah, especially. So, and I mean, even his rookie year, he did a good job doing that. Look, a lot of people are saying, well, he gets open and all of that. I think Aiyuk is really good. I know he gets open. I know that the sample size is what's affecting his production, but the production is what the production is. And when we're talking about Brandon Aiyuk getting paid, you think the 49ers are going to sit there and say, look, BA, we saw you were wide open here. So we're going to pay you $25 million because you're getting wide open here. No, they're going to say, look, we were tough negotiators with George Kittle, and he came with 2 seasons, including one that included one of the breaking the NFL record for yards for a tight end and first team All-Pro, and it got contentious with him. Deebo Samuel came off of a season where he scored 14 touchdowns with almost 1,800 total yards, all purpose, and he had a tough negotiation. What do you think is going to happen for Brandon Aiyuk? Really?
It's going to be dicey. That's 100% true. And your point about, having the All-Pro kind of in the bank there is a good one. because you know the Niners are going to bring that up. You know that's going to come up. So that is a fair point. Stephen Duckett says the quarterback gets the credit for moving the offense down the field into field goal range. The kicker's forgotten about unless he misses. It's
Right.
kind of true. We just
That
always
is really
assume
true.
it's going to be good until it's not. And then, oh, that guy's friggin' terrible. The analogy I keep going back to with the kickers is that they're like lawyers. Nobody likes them until you need them. So we'll see what happens with Jake Moody. I hope he's good, man. I'm rooting for the kid. It's not his fault he was drafted where he was. I mean, well, I guess it is because he played so well at Michigan, but you know
Right.
what I'm saying? Like, he didn't force the 49ers to draft him in the third round, which was really the fourth round. Like, Kyle said it after the draft, and I think he's right. It was a compensatory pick at the end of the third round. There was more than 32 picks in that third round before the Niners picked him. So you can call it a third round pick, but I mean, essentially it was a fourth round pick, which was part of the reason I didn't freak out about it on our live show, because it's like, okay, it was a fourth round pick. Could they have waited to the fifth round? Maybe, who knows? But like, let's not overreact.
No, 100%, 100%. I look, I think there's been a lot of overreactions both ways. I think a lot of people are finding different ways to justify why this Jake Moody pick was so excellent and so brilliant and 3D chess from the 49ers. And then you also have other people to be that are bending over backwards to explain why a kicker is utterly useless and all of that. The only thing for me with the kicker pick is that if you look at the translation of kickers drafted and their actual success with the team that drafted them over an extended period of time, I mean, I can't do it right now. Just go look at the list of kickers that have been drafted that had success with the actual team that drafted them. It's not a very good translation. It is not. In fact, even that transition, because kickers can go mentally fast. You have guys like Blair Walsh, right? Blair Walsh was phenomenal as a rookie.
Yep.
Blair Walsh by year 3 was off the Vikings, or year 4. Dan Bailey was really, really good for the Cowboys for his first 5 years in the NFL. He was really, really good for the Cowboys. And then he got hurt and things just fell off. Things changed really, really fast with the kicker. And so that's where I think it was really, really risky. And I don't know if I would go as far to say, oh, it was a great pick, brilliant, because you don't know of the transition between the
Yeah.
kicker from college to the NFL. But in terms of fulfilling something that they needed, yeah, like I'm not a kickers aren't important kind of guy. Like, obviously, I hate, using third round picks that are, even if they are fourth round picks on a kicker. But at the same time, you also understand because, hey, as problematic as Robbie Gould was at times during the regular season, and as problematic as some of his contract negotiations and some of his antics were as well, the fact that he never misses kicks in the playoffs was so valuable for the 49ers. I mean, we saw them in 2012 go through a playoff run with David Akers being
Ugh.
Mr. Oh my God, you don't know what he's going to kick, where he's going to kick, like what the Cowboys just went through. And
Yeah, with
so
Maher.
having that reliability makes an absolute difference. Remember, like, dude, the Niners had Billy Cundiff on their active roster going into the NFC Championship game. They had him on their 53 as an inactive because they weren't sure about David Akers. So, yeah.
But you know what? Even with Akers being as bad as he was, they got to the Super Bowl. So you could make that argument also.
Right.
Philippe watching on YouTube says, we needed a kicker, but the only way it won't bother me is if he works out. I get that. There are passionate people on both sides of this, to be sure. I will say kickers lead your team in scoring every year. Jake Moody is the all-time leading scorer at Michigan. He has more points scored
Right.
at Michigan than Desmond Howard, and Desmond Howard won the Heisman Trophy.
Right.
So that's not nothing. I know that it's not nothing. So just let's take a deep breath there. One more draft winner for me, and that's Trey Lance. And look,
Yes.
his future is by no means certain, but anytime he has one less person to contend with, that's a win for Trey Lance, because they keep putting up roadblocks, I feel like, and they could have put up another one if they had drafted Dorian Thompson-Robinson or any of the other quarterbacks in this draft. And the fact that he doesn't have that extra competition, that's a win for him. That's one step closer to getting reps and proving himself.
Oh, 100%. He's a big winner individually, too, because I think getting traded would have kind of sucked for him, having to restart without ever starting at the place that he thought he was going to start.
Yep.
And I think, look, given all that the Niners gave up for him, Rob, I still look at it as with him, his best opportunity to succeed is with San Francisco, and the Niners'
Yes.
best value is if he succeeds for them. And so I don't know what exactly was going on. We knew that there were massive rumors that they were trying to trade him. Someone clearly leaked to Ian Rappaport, and clearly the value, and there wasn't that much interest either, it feels like, in trading for him, and it wasn't near the value what the Niners would have wanted. It felt like the Jimmy Garoppolo trade situation kind of all over again. Remember when the Niners were trying to trade Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard in 2019, and like teams were offering a 6th-round pick and they were looking for like a 3rd-round pick for CJ Beathard or something like that. So
Think
it
about
felt kind of
that.
like that. And so he's a massive winner. I think the Niners in a way are a winner too, because I just look at their roster, Rob. I think they would have been better off keeping him more than anything.
I totally agree with you. 1000%. By the way, a 3rd-round pick for CJ Beathard. You couldn't even get a tackling dummy
Was it
for
a third
CJ
or a
Beathard.
fourth? Was it a third or a fourth? It was something like that, right? They wanted a mid-round pick.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous. They overvalue their own assets, but I think. Do you think watching the draft, I got to think by the time it was over, Trey exhaled a little bit, don't you? Like he had to at least have it had to be on his radar.
Oh, 100%. How can it not be? He's human.
And that leads us into something that you mentioned to me when we talked earlier today. After the draft, we actually got to hear from Kyle Shanahan, right? He emerged from hiding from the
Right.
darkness. He shaved off most of the beard, which by the way made him look like 10 years younger. I loved it. Please keep it, Kyle. But he was not asked something that you wanted him asked. And what did you want to hear from Kyle afterwards?
I wanted his thoughts on the entire, like, hey, where you tried to trade him, all of that. Now, I didn't expect him to say a different answer from John Lynch. I just wanted to hear how irritated he would have gotten by that question.
You know what, though? I think it's fair. I mean, hell, they asked John Lynch about Brock Purdy at the league meetings, and he's like, well, we're hoping to get him back by training
Right.
camp. And then they asked Kyle the next day, and Kyle said it might be week 4. So
Well,
they're not always.
Kyle mentioned he was hoping for training camp in his post presser, right? When he was talking about the 4th quarterback, he was saying, "Oh, we hope to get Brock back by training camp," or something like that along those lines.
So, yeah, he said we hope to get, they were talking about training camp, and he said we hope to get Brock back soon. That seems like it would be absolutely nuts to me. Like,
I
training
agree.
camp, like why, even if he can come back at training camp, why are we rushing it? There's no need to rush it. Let him come back, let him get his feet underneath him. See, that's why this whole thing is
Look, Rob,
delicate. It's delicate.
and so let's take this a step further, right? Because if the 49ers really view Brock Purdy as the quarterback of their future, which I think anybody who's listening to them talk right now is getting the impression that they view it that way. Correct or wrong, they seem to view it that way. Rushing him back from injury would be horrible for him, right?
Yes.
Like making sure you have to make sure that he is, if you view him not only as your quarterback short term, but you view him as a guy that perhaps could be your long-term answer at quarterback, you have to make sure that he is fully healthy, fully confident, and fully able to play before you put him back on the field, right?
Have to. Like, there's no other. I don't know why you would want to do anything else. That's the weird part to me. If this guy is as good and as valuable as you were telling us he is, then don't rush him back. Then
Right.
say, look, it's his job. We're not worried. We told Brock, take your time, right? Take your time. And when you come back, we want you to be as good as you were when you left. And this job will be waiting for you when you come back. But I don't think they told him that. And I would imagine, considering how Brock got the job in the first place, he doesn't feel too secure knowing that could easily happen to him.
Right.
So it's a delicate situation on all sides.
Oh, 100%, 100%. But I would say that that's the least covered angle in all of this, because everybody looks at it as, well, I feel a certain way about Trey Lance. I feel a certain way about Brock Purdy. I feel a certain way about this. I feel a certain way about that. So they throw their emotions into this guy should be the starter, this guy shouldn't. If you listen to how they talk, they've told you basically that they think Brock Purdy is a long-term answer at quarterback. Now, whether you agree with them, we can have that debate all offseason, and I'm sure we're going to keep having it over and over again. But that's what they seem to believe. And if they do that, then it is their like, I don't know, it is their duty, I guess, for lack of a better word there. I wish I didn't have to use the word duty.
I love it.
But it is their duty to ensure that they do everything to make sure that he is not put in a precarious situation when he comes back. And I still think with him not having an offseason, Rob, I think it's a little bit scary to put him back on the field. The Niners keep saying that they don't want to deal with Trey Lance, right? They don't want to have to deal with the growing pains with Trey Lance. Well, what if there's growing pains with Brock Purdy coming back from injury? What if he needs to get his timing back because, hey, I haven't played the entire offseason. I haven't done any of this. What if he needs all of that? Will they give him that equity? Will he get those things? I question that, Rob. I really do. I really do. It's not just a Trey Lance situation here. I question whether, hey, if Brock Purdy comes back and Brock Purdy is not playing as well as he was week 9 of last year, will the Niners have a short leash for Brock Purdy? I think they could.
I think that's totally fair. And look, we saw Jimmy Garoppolo when he came back with Denver. It was bad. Like bad. And that's someone that had reps and years with the 49ers starters. And it still took him time to get back to, his normal level of play. So if that's going to be the case for Jimmy Garoppolo, I think it's fair to expect Brock to need some time too. And I don't know necessarily if he's going to get it. We got a super chat here from Gammon Brown who says Sam Darnold is still having growing pains.
Sam Darnold's had growing pains since his junior year at USC.
Yeah, well, I'm choosing not to talk about Sam Darnold because everyone can read my tweets from this morning at Stats on Fire, and you can see clearly how I feel about that.
I noticed you went full Ian Rappaport at the beginning of the show by mentioning only Brock or Trey with Brandon Aiyuk.
Yeah, take that. You know what? It's a little revenge for Trey Lance. I mean, God, and David Lombardi's out there tweeting about Sam Darnold has done more in this league than Trey Lance. Yeah, he's done more bad in the league than Trey Lance, David. I mean, come on.
Of course. But he's also he started 55 games. Of course he's done more in the league than Trey Lance. Trey Lance has started 4 games. Right. That doesn't say much, right? Like, I don't know there's a lot of, veteran mid-tier receivers that have done more in the NFL than Garrett Wilson.
Right.
Just because they've played longer and done more. But Garrett Wilson just won a Rookie of the Year. Nobody would say that, whatever mid-tier veteran receiver like Kendrick Bourne is a better player than Garrett Wilson. Hell no. And so I will say this, Rob. The one argument for Sam Darnold, and I've seen nobody in the Niners media make this argument. The one argument for him is not the BS games from last year. It is not. If you want to come here and tell me, oh, look at Sam Darnold going 4-2 the last 6 games for Carolina last year with Chuba Hubbard and Dante Foreman running for 1,000,000 yards and Sam Darnold having the 5 for 15 for 50 yards and 2 fumble game against the Saints and all of that. If you want to give me that as him playing well, that I'm not going to buy it. But the one argument for him is the only stretch of football in Sam Darnold's career where Sam Darnold has looked like a potential franchise quarterback came as a rookie. He started off as a rookie, right? First play of his career, he threw the pick 6 against the Lions on Monday Night Football, all of that. But he got hurt, and then I think it was like weeks 8 through 12 as a rookie. Now, the coordinator for him as a rookie was Jeremy Bates, who was a Mike Shanahan disciple. He was Mike Shanahan's offensive coordinator in Denver, I think, when they drafted Jay Cutler. But it's the Shanahan-style offense that he runs. And Sam Darnold had a stretch of games at the end of his rookie year where he legitimately looked like, hey, this could be the Jets' future at quarterback. Now, he didn't work out for the Jets at all, but he had a legitimate stretch of games there in a similar system for Jeremy Bates, who is a Shanahan guy that he played well. Now, that was 5 years ago, Rob. He might be a completely different player from then. But to me, if you're going to try and make the Sam Darnold argument, it's that one. Hey, look at what he did with Jeremy Bates. Now let's put him in a similar system. He might have that same success. And that was 5 years ago. Look, I like Sam Darnold's physical traits more than you. I think there's a better possibility that he could have success in this offense than you based on who he is physically and based on who he will play with in this offense. But if you're going to make the argument based on 6 games he played for Carolina last year when he was about as mediocre as it can get, I don't buy that.
So to go back to what you were saying, in Sam's rookie year, he had an injury. He came back in week 13, or game 13.
Yeah.
So game 13, and he played the rest of that year. He averaged 64% completions in those 4 games. He had 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, a 99 quarterback rating, and he threw for an average of 230 yards per game. And that is the best stretch of his career.
On a pretty crappy team, too. On a pretty crappy team.
He went 1-3 in those games. Not that a QB wins is a thing,
right?
But people seem to be giving him credit for that win when he had friggin' 30
Right, he was
passing
5 for
yards. So,
15 against
like,
the Saints for 50 yards. So yeah, QB wins aren't a thing, but that's the one stretch, Rob, that I look at in his career and say, if you want to hitch your wagon to the Sam Darnold train, argue me based on that, based on what
right.
he did with Jeremy Bates. But I don't see anybody in the media making that argument. Instead, they're sitting here saying, hey, look at what he did last year. Well, when Chuba Hubbard and Dante Foreman are running for 80 million yards, like how many different quarterbacks can go 5 for 15 for 50 yards and win a game? That's like crediting Jimmy Garoppolo for winning the NFC Championship game throwing for 60 yards.
Yeah, no, it's just illogical. Like we've all been watching football long enough to know that it's a little different. And just I actually went through and looked at it. In the 6 games that we're talking about, the Panthers ran the ball 188 times for 888 yards. They averaged almost 5 yards per carry and 31 carries per game. Give that rushing attack to a lot of quarterbacks, and they're going to look better than they've ever looked.
Yep.
D'Angelo Evans said Sam Darnold is afraid of his own shadow. Darnold looks at you as if he wants to run away. Scott Hill says Trey will
D'Angelo
find.
really doesn't like Sam Darnold.
Well, it's true.
D'Angelo and Rob should do a Sam Darnold show together.
Hey, anytime, D'Angelo. You know where to find me. Trey will finally get his opportunity to compete, says Scott Hill, and take quarterback 1. This is a fact. There's a lot of people making factual statements about the 49ers quarterback situation. I will say that. Let's get to one more thing that we heard after the draft that caught both of our ears, and that came from Assistant General Manager Adam Peters, who threw this nugget out there. Quote, I'd say this draft class was our most collaborative between the coaches and the scouts. He also said that last year was very collaborative too, but that this year was even better. The reason that caught my ear was because there was a report a few years ago from, I believe, Matt Miller, who said that there was tension in the front office between Shanahan and Lynch. And there was a feeling among a lot of scouts that Kyle Shanahan wasn't listening enough to the scouts. So I hear this from Adam Peters about collaboration between coaches and scouts. And I say, one, was that report by Matt Miller? Maybe that was more true than people wanted to say or admit at the time. And 2, are things better now?
I think if it was reported without a negative connotation and it was just reported that, hey, the coaches have the bigger say in the 49ers organization, a lot of people would have been like, that's true, and moved on. Because I think that was pretty obvious for the first half of it. Well, you know why I know it was obvious, Rob? The Niners hired Kyle Shanahan before they hired a GM. In that circle, right, they tried interviewing George Payton. They tried interviewing Chris Ballard. They tried interviewing Brian Gutekunst. I think Nick Caserio as well. And all these people pulled their name out of the hat. So it felt like Shanahan didn't want, a really strong personnel guy. He wanted to be the number 1 guy in the organization and then enter John Lynch, right? So it felt like that's how they did it. And then you look at the first drafts, right? You look at some of the people they've traded up for that have just been purely Shanahan wants, right? Dante Pettis and Joe Williams and CJ Beathard and all of these people. So, clearly the coaches have a great say in all of this. I think that them being more collaborative is just Shanahan understanding, hey, I can't be head scout, head GM, head coach, head everything. And I think that they're starting to rely more on their scouts. And I think that's led to a lot of successful picks later in the draft. And the coaches and the scouts. I mean, I think the one thing the Niners have that's different from the non-collaboration in the Balky era is, from what I understand, Balky used to draft players when coaches would say it wouldn't work. So Vic Fangio would say, hey, Tank Carradine is not a 5 technique in my defense. He can't put on that weight. And Trent Baalke still drafted Tank Carradine. They moved up the weight to 290 pounds. It didn't work. They made him cut back down to 275. That regime left. This regime left. And he ended up having a couple years as a, strong side defensive end at about 280 pounds, right? So there's not that, because it feels like the Niners drafting is always to fit a profile. So running back, they're looking for these 3 or 4 specific traits, and they just get guys and coach them up that have those traits, right? And the coaching staff's development is unbelievable, right? Their development in terms of growing players from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, the improvements they make is fantastic. And so I think that's where the collaboration is really coming in, Rob. I don't know if this is as much of a story as it should be. I think it is more of a story because of the negative connotation of Miller's report, which caused the Niners to push back on it so vehemently.
A lot.
I think if it was presented in a different context, I think it would have been brushed aside and this would be pretty normal. day of business, and it would just be, hey, look, they're improving their process as they go, and they're understanding better. What do we need to do to be, better at doing this as a football team? Because at the end of the day, the draft is a crapshoot, right? Like, it's not that if you listen to the scouts, you're going to have an unequivocally better
Right.
draft than if you listen to the coaches.
And I'm sure there's some of both. There's some times where the scouts have it nailed because they spend a ton of time, and there's other times where scouts,
Right.
we all have our biases. They fall in love with people, and you need somebody else who's a little more objective to stand back and say, this
Right.
isn't going to work out. Shout out to Wayne Breezy, by the way, in the chat. Thank you. What's
What up,
Wayne?
Breezy?
But I thought it was interesting by Peters to throw that out there. I'm fascinated by the whole Adam Peters mystery. He's the hot candidate that everybody wants to hire. And all of a sudden he pulls his name out. And to me, that said, he knows he's going to be the GM soon. Are they going to make a change? Then we got that report that Nick Caserio was going to leave Houston after the draft, and Adam Peters is going to be a target there. There's a lot of smoke around Adam Peters.
I think that's about, and we saw George Payton do this for years. We saw Brian Gutekunst do this for years. I think these guys, these heavy personnel guys, when they want to become GM, they don't want the coach to outrank them. And so I think that's a part of all of this. And I will say the Adam Peters quandary seems to be reported pretty simply as if the 49ers draft a good player, it was all Adam Peters. If they draft a bad player, hey, let's beg on John Lynch, which I don't get that one. I think it's always a little overblown. I mean, John Lynch publicly said, that Adam Peters was the guy who really pushed for Ambry Thomas right after they picked Ambry Thomas. And that might be their worst pick in the last 2 years. I mean, he made the roster last year simply because they didn't want to pay the veteran minimum to whoever else that they could have got. I mean, Janoris Jenkins was getting snaps before the guy. So tells you all you need to know about how they feel about him. And Janoris Jenkins was signed, week 8?
Yeah. God,
and so, the way I see it, Rob, it's a crapshoot. I think everybody has their hits and misses. I don't think one person should get unequivocal credit for the right picks and one person should get the blame for the wrong picks. But I feel like sometimes there's this impression that Adam Peters found Fred Warner, and Adam Peters found George Kittle, and Adam Peters found Deebo Samuel, and Adam Peters found this guy, and John Lynch wanted Dante Pettis, and John Lynch wanted Solomon Thomas.
Damn him. Yeah, no, that's fair. Peters never seems to get flack. He only gets praise, which, by the way, if you're Adam Peters, that's a pretty sweet place to.
It's awesome, right? It's awesome. It's the greatest gig ever. In fact, it's kind of the Niners skill players gig, right? When the Niners win, we're crediting all of them. When they lose, we just start hammering the quarterback.
You know that expression, victory has 1,000 fathers and defeats an orphan. That's kind of where Adam Peters lives. He never gets blamed for anything bad, and everything good is all him, unless it's John Lynch falling in love with Solomon Thomas. I was talking with a draft evaluator the other day, and he said something interesting to me. He said he thinks that Kyle Shanahan, the GM, saves John Lynch, the GM, some of the time.
You mean Kyle Shanahan, the coach?
No, that basically Lynch falls in love with people and that Kyle steps in and is like, this ain't the guy. And kind of it's like, in other words, like Lynch may make a few more bad picks, but Kyle kind of overrules him. I don't know if that's true or not. That was just one person's opinion. I don't know.
That's interesting. I do think the one thing the Niners have nailed under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch for the most part is the character evaluation.
Yes.
I mean, they draft, they draft the highest character guys. I mean, just look at this draft. Jair Brown, right? Off the charts, according to every single person from the character evaluation standpoint. And so they seem to nail that. I wonder if that's really a John Lynch thing or if that's a collaborative thing. I don't know, but they do that exceptionally well. They nail high draft characters. Sometimes I would say I feel like they overvalue it, where a guy is such a good guy where they can, look, this is going to sound weird because I'm actually a huge fan of the guy and I'm still rooting and I think he's going to have a lot of success. But I was not as big a fan of Trey Lance before the draft, and I felt like some of the buzz that he got before the draft was because they fell in love with the person rather than the actual player. And I felt like that happened. Or better example, because we don't know how Trey Lance's career is played out yet. So that's not fair to know. Because, hey, falling in love with the person might have been the best possible thing because he could turn out to be a freaking superstar. So we don't know that. Sam Darnold, perfect to me of that. Like everybody fell in love with Sam Darnold, the person, Sam Darnold this, Sam Darnold that. He threw in the rain in his pro day with the hat on just to come out and compete for his guys and all of that. I think that happens way too much in the draft process with quarterbacks, especially.
That's fair. And we'll find out, where things stand with the character of these guys as the years go on. I will say the Niners made 8 non-kicker draft picks, and 4 of them were team captains. Winters, Willis, Bell, and Brown. All of those guys were team captains. And I do think that matters. Like, there is a culture with the 49ers, and the teams that are good for years on end have a culture that is partly enforced by the other players in the locker room, by the peers on that team. And it is clear that the Niners have that. And if you have a team loaded with team captains, like that's only going to help you throughout the year. These guys are going to grind. There's a reason when the team starts 3-5 or 3-4 that they are able to come back and they don't just fold up the tent. It's because they have high character guys in the locker room. And hell, Lynch said it in the pre-draft press conference. He basically said, we do know what we're doing when it comes to character. So they clearly think they've cracked the code.
100% they have. I mean, listen to Trey Lance talk, listen to Brock Purdy talk, listen to all these guys talk. Like, they're highly educated, highly eloquent, and like high character individuals. That part comes across to us, right? Like it becomes obvious to us, like, oh, like these guys would light up a room if they sat in an interview with people.
Right. I totally agree. And good. That is part of the equation. It's not everything. It doesn't mean everybody they pick is going to be awesome, but it is part of the equation. There's that old saying that talent is the floor and work ethic and character is the ceiling on a player. And if that's the case, even if you don't pick studs, if you can say, hey, we got the absolute most out of everybody that we drafted, that's a win too. Glass half full guy says, do you guys still think Aiyuk Ngakoue and other veteran defensive ends are still an option for the 49ers? Here's the good thing. Today is the first day where any veteran free agent signing does not count against the compensatory pick formula. So basically, I think a lot of teams were sitting back and waiting because they want to see, number one, how the draft shakes out. And now it's like, okay, we might have a couple needs left. Let's see who's on the market. We'll make our choice. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, at least it doesn't cost us a draft pick. And oh, by the way, Vish, quietly over the weekend, what did the 49ers do? They restructured Christian McCaffrey's deal. So they have around, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they have around $11 million in cap space, give or take. And I have been saying all offseason, I would love Aiyuk Ngakoue. I know Steph Sanchez is on that train with me. Levin was on the Justin Houston train. But I think a veteran pass rusher could really put the cherry on top of this defense.
I agree. I'm a big Aiyuk Ngakoue fan. I've been a big fan of him since he was in Jacksonville. He's a terrific pass rusher. Look, I think glass half full guy, and you nailed it. It only became an option for them because we know how much they value the compensatory formula. It only became an option for them now. The other guy I would throw into the mix with Aiyuk Ngakoue, and I think they're all options, but I don't think the Niners are going to overpay at the point they're at. I think they're contented with their roster, and if they can get Aiyuk Ngakoue on a 1-year, $8 million deal, I think they would absolutely floor it. But if Aiyuk Ngakoue is still looking for a 3-year, $50 million deal, I don't think the 49ers are going to swing it that way. And so I think it's going to be a matter of how does the money work out. But Leonard Floyd is another guy I would throw into that conversation as well. I think Leonard Floyd's an absolute stud too. And that's another guy that I think would be a game changer for the 49ers. So 100%, Rob. I mean, if we're talking Super Bowl, I still think, D Ford's impact is missed because the one thing I also think that was missed with D Ford that we don't talk about enough is that he was a strip sack guy. He was not just a speed rusher. And I think having a strip sack guy with Aiyuk Ngakoue, I don't know his actual forced fumbles off the top of my head. But I know Aiyuk Ngakoue is a strip sack guy. Yeah, I think that would be a great, difference maker on this defense for sure.
So in 2017, he had 6 forced fumbles that led the league. He's got 21 in his entire career. So that is a thing that he does. And anytime you can cause chaos as a defender, you absolutely should. The one thing you mentioned, though, with the overpay, I wouldn't give him a 3-year deal. But if I'm the 49ers and you ask for 9 and he comes back with 11, don't mess around. Just pay it. Just pay it. Now is the time to be greedy. Warren Buffett said, when everybody's cautious, be greedy. And when everybody's greedy, be cautious. Well, now is the time to be greedy. The NFC is down. Look what the Eagles did in the draft. The Eagles traded up like 50,000 times to go get people that they wanted because I think they recognize the NFC is weak. We got a really good team, and we can grab this conference essentially by the throat and make sure that the road to the Super Bowl goes through Philly every single year. I loved how aggressive Philly was. Well, I shouldn't say that. I didn't like it as a Niner fan, but you know what I'm saying. I applauded them for being aggressive. I think the Niners need to react the same way. All this talk about the Super Bowl window, well, act like it. Go get Yannick Ngakoue. Pay him an extra $1 million if that's what it takes. Jed always talks about how he's willing to pay $1 million for wins. Do it, and let's go get this thing.
I agree that that's what they should do, but just given their history, I think they won't be reckless. It'll have to make sense from
be a little reckless. Like, why not? Why not be a little reckless, right? You can go 60 miles an hour in a 55. It's okay, man. Now, if you were ever going to be reckless, isn't now the time?
Yeah, there isn't a better time. I mean, I look at the NFC right now. It's Philadelphia and 49ers at the top for sure. I still think Dallas is going to be in that conversation. I like Dallas's draft better than a lot of people. I think Mozzie Smith is a hell of a player, and I think that's something they really missed on their defense, which was a little bit of size. I talked about it before the Niners-Cowboys playoff game because they only had Big John Hankins there really as a just like pure just size guy in their defensive line. And then Seattle is really probably the next team I would throw into the conversation. So the NFC is really wide open outside of really two teams we're looking at with the Niners and the Eagles. And so I agree with you. If there was a time to be reckless, it would be now. It's out of character for the 49ers.
That's okay. Your character thus far hasn't gotten you any Super Bowl championships. So maybe it's time to switch it up a little bit. Carlos, as Rob is speaking facts, this is the time. Lynch and Kyle, wake the hell up and bring in more ballers. I just hope that they do. I really do. Like, just go get one more piece, right? One more piece to where you make life easier for your quarterback, whoever it is, if they have to start. Just why not? To save this money, to sit on this money for what? Like, what does that get you? You know? So
because look, I think they might also look at it as we could sign Yannick Ngakoue now, or we could wait until the trade deadline and see how the season plays out and then make a move there for maybe a bigger player. So I think it's going to be financially there. Like, what is going to make sense from that standpoint? And look, the Niners have, I think one of the biggest misconceptions with the Niners is that they're not aggressive, Rob. They're really aggressive. They're just not as reckless as like the Rams, where they'll do really unorthodox things to try and sacrifice the future for 1 year, right? Like, everything is aggressive, but it's aggressive from ensuring that our future is not thrown away, right?
But
is that a fair way to put it?
I agree with you, yes. But ask the Rams if they regret it.
Right, exactly. And so that's where I also agree with you that you're absolutely right, because I think you put a guy like Yannick Ngakoue on this team, especially sack fumbles, because I don't think they have a sack fumble guy on this team. I think that's a big difference maker.
I agree. And look, they're set up to succeed in that way, right? Because what they want to do is push up the middle with Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead, and you get the speed guys flying off the edge to strip the ball. You've got pressure up the middle. Like, that's it. That is
Drake
it.
Jackson, too, who's unbelievably talented.
Yes. By the way, he's another draft winner, Drake Jackson, I think.
Oh, yeah. But I didn't think they were going to take an edge player from at any point. In fact, Larry Kruger and I, your new friend Larry Kruger and I debated this before the draft. He was talking about guys like Isaiah Foskey and stuff like that. I was like, look, Drake Jackson's more talented as a prospect than a lot of these guys that we're talking about. Like, for me, like, why would the Niners take another edge player if he's not as gifted as Drake Jackson was? I mean, Drake Jackson, I think a lot of people thought would be a top 40 pick just because of the athletic traits as a pass rusher. He's not too dissimilar from the guy that the Jets took at 15, Will McDonald. He's not that talented, but he's not that far off.
But, like, if you sign that veteran pass rusher, You put Unique or whoever it is in a part-time role. Drake Jackson then doesn't have to play every down, so you keep him fresher. If you can get 10 sacks combined out of those two guys, that's a damn good start. So we'll see if the Niners actually do it. By the way, shout out to Kilo1718, new YouTube member. Appreciate you coming to the family. Again, if you missed at the top of the show, YouTube memberships are a thing now for the Gold Standard channel. So please, please, please sign up.
Basically, if you want to get your comment responded to by Rob Guerrera, you have to be a YouTube member.
That is not true, although you do get priority response. I will say that. Not saying, I'm just saying.
What is priority response, though? If I'm a YouTube member on the Gold Standard Network and I respond to a comment at 10:58 p.m., when Rob has just put his kids to bed and he's about to take it off for the night and put it away, does that mean I'm going to get a response at 10:59?
Well, first of all, I see all the comments. Anytime you comment, it goes right to my inbox. So I see all of them. But I'm saying, like, if I'm doing a live show and you're a member and you comment, I'm looking at yours first. Before I look at the other ones, I'm looking at yours first to see if it's something that I want to talk about. And I'll try to get to as many as I can throughout the show.
All right. Sounds fair. Sounds fair.
Why'd you have to mention the Larry Krueger thing? Now people are all up in the chat talking about it. Yes.
Well, you're the one who explained the whole situation to me like 40 minutes ago. I didn't know anything about it. And then I saw the comments. I saw the comments mentioned it a couple of times already, so I had to just throw it in like your new friend.
Well, there was a little friction between Larry and the Gold Standard channel, but we worked it all out now. Everybody had a conversation, so it's all good. We're all cool. So let's, there's no beef here. We can keep it things, positive.
Everybody's friendly.
Yeah, in the 49ers content community.
Let's go.
Boy, you really started real quick, just to make it full circle. You really started an Aiyuk Debo kind of war in the chat.
Dude, that goes on every single moment of every single day. I think Debo lost a lot of 49ers fans when he requested that trade, though. I'll tell you that. A lot of people are so upset with Debo Samuel.
That's true. I still think Aiyuk is the best receiver, like pure receiver. Debo can do things, on the ground and with the handoffs and stuff like that Aiyuk can't do as well. But I think pure receiver, it's Aiyuk.
When you're saying pure receiver, though, you're just saying he's a better route runner than Debo Samuel. And there's no doubt about that. When you look at Brandon Aiyuk's hips, how he's able to accelerate and decelerate, how he's able to change direction without losing speed, how smooth he is as an athlete, for sure. Debo Samuel is a little bit, he takes some extra steps sometimes in his route running. He wins more on leverage and his strength with his explosion rather than winning on just pure technique and all of that. But that's what you're talking about. But playing receiver is more than just running routes. And we're talking about an offense with the 49ers when they put their receivers in so many condensed formations and they create so much space for them. Like, are you telling me that, like, just because a guy's a better route runner, he's a better football player at the receiver position? Like, I don't, like, when there's more that goes into playing wide receiver than simply just that guy's a better route runner. Like, we don't rank receivers based on that. Like, nobody thinks Devontae Adams is the best receiver in the NFL anymore. Everyone says Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase. Devontae Adams is still the best route runner in the NFL. So, like, if we're going to say, well, he's the best receiver, you're purely talking about route running. But I don't think route running is the key to producing as a receiver in the NFL anymore. And when you have a guy who you can throw a quick screen to and he can take it 80 and score every play, I'm taking that guy 10 times out of 10 over the guy that, runs really, really pretty routes. It's more effective today. Now, Debo wasn't that guy last year. That's the problem.
Well, that's my issue, is not the high-end stuff. Yeah, if both guys are playing at their best, Debo's better. But your floor matters to me as well. And for a guy that's as good as Debo is, he can disappear at times. And that scares me.
I mean, Brandon Aiyuk's floor was splitting snaps with Trent Sherfield, man.
Well, that was Kyle Shanahan. That wasn't
Well, we got to stop this argument, too, before we go to places we don't want. Because I think both are really awesome football players.
Yes.
I don't understand the Debo Samuel kind of hate. He's really had one down year as, a guy that was drafted, and he's still 2 years removed from one of the great receiver seasons in 49ers history. And we're talking about a team with Terrell Owens and Jerry Rice in their history. Yeah, and then Brandon Aiyuk is obviously a phenomenal player too. So I don't want to get caught here talking about, well, this guy's better than this guy, this, because they're both excellent players at the end of the day.
They are both excellent players. I want to state that for the record. I disagree that Debo's only had one down year. I mean, 600 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving last year for Debo is not that's not a good year, especially with what they're paying him. Like, that's not a good
Oh,
year.
I agree. I agree. No doubt that Debo didn't produce to the level that you expect Debo to produce when you pay him $25 million. And part of that is availability, right? And Brandon Ayuk's availability is a massive asset. Like, that's like, you can't, like, I'm a Debo fan. I'm also an Ayuk fan, but like, I'm a Debo fan, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you, well, he was hurt. That's why he didn't produce. Because part of production is being on the field and producing.
Randall Riley says, such a dilemma when you have two awesome players. Other teams' fans must hate us when we argue over two dogs. That's a fair point. We have said many times that they are really, really good. Caesar, watching on YouTube, says, what does it say to you that the 49ers are not picking up a quarterback in the draft or a free agent? We kind of talked a little bit about this earlier. To me, it just says that one more opportunity for Trey, or one less hurdle for Trey Lance
Can we
to
go
have
here?
to overcome.
Can we go here? Because I think they should have picked one, and it didn't.
You do?
Yes, and it wasn't about trading Trey Lance or not trading Trey Lance. I think you should draft a quarterback in every draft, right? Was that the old Bill Walsh saying?
Yep.
Yeah, you should draft a quarterback in every draft. I think that's legitimate. Like, especially when you've gone through the quarterback injuries that the Niners have gone through, when you've seen how many different guys have produced in this system, why not take a chance on another guy and see what happens? Look, when we're talking about a clean bill of health, Brock Purdy's injury is injured right now. Trey Lance just got cleared, fully cleared, right? The 49ers just told us he's fully cleared. Sam Darnold has never had a season in his career where he hasn't gotten hurt. Why not throw another guy into the mix? I think they should have taken one. I think what happened to them was they had the long gap between picking in the 3rd round and picking in the 5th round. Yeah. And I think that's why they felt like, hey, we got to get our kicker and tight end now. Because if we don't, we might not be able to get them when we come back in the 5th round. So they went that route after Jair Brown. And I think we saw the run on quarterbacks. We saw Aiden O'Connell go in the 4th round. We saw Dorian Thompson-Robinson go in the 5th round. We saw Jaron Hall go in the 5th round. We saw Clayton Tune go in the 5th round. We saw all those guys go between that time period. And then you come back and you look at your board and you might not look at quarterback as a valuable commodity anymore because all the quarterbacks you might have considered in your 5th round spot were pretty much gone.
I do think it's interesting that, Brock Purdy has the success that he had, and all of a sudden all these teams are drafting quarterbacks late. Like,
so I don't think it was that.
I don't know.
I think this was just a draft where you had a lot of senior quarterbacks who had some traits where you could look at as possibly being a starter. Like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, he played a lot at UCLA. He's still, not the perfect prospect, but he's got an above average NFL arm. And he's an above-average NFL athlete. Like, you think you could turn that guy into a starter one day. Jaron Hall played at BYU. He's 25, but he's got NFL arm. He's an NFL caliber thrower. Clayton Tune, really, really good athlete, right? So I think you just had a draft this time, Rob, where there were just a lot of guys at the end of the draft versus, like, remember the Jacob Eason draft where you had, like, Jacob Eason and Jake Fromm and James Morgan and Jake Luton? Like, who's touching those guys,
I guess.
Look at 2019 when Stidham and Finley and those guys went because they were a little bit better in that range.
No, maybe. I just think that people are all of a sudden valuing those things. Like, all the talk was, look at these guys that have had, 1,000 career pass attempts. Look at Brock. I think it had some effect. I'll say that. Maybe not the whole reason.
Dude, if they had that effect because of Brock Purdy, then that's a problem. Because Patrick Mahomes had 1,500 throws at Texas Tech. And so, like, if there was ever a reason to take a quarterback because he has 1,500 throws, why not make it because of Patrick Mahomes?
Well, you're not wrong about that, but that's what a lot of draft people were saying anyway.
Oh, yeah, they were saying it for sure. I mean, last year, I saw Brian Peacock had a great tweet, right? Like, last year's draft was who can find the next Deebo Samuel. This guy's Deebo Samuel-ish. This guy has Deebo Samuel qualities. And then this year, it's like, who's going to find the next Brock Purdy, right? And Peacock said, which is the next 49ers player that they're going to say, who's going to find the next version of that next year?
It helps to have all these people around them too. You can find the next so-and-so when he's playing with Trent Williams and Kittle and Deebo and Aiyuk and Warner and yada, yada, yada. One last thing really quick that I want to get to with you specifically, because I feel like you and I sort of have these conversations. I said with Larry and I've said other places that I think the 49ers have undergone a philosophical shift at safety. They are way less concerned with, we just can't give up the big play. They're way more concerned now with guys that make game-changing, turnover-worthy plays. I think when Jimmy was there, Jimmy Garoppolo was there. I think that Kyle looked at it like, if we just don't give up the big play, Jimmy's good enough. Our defense is good enough. We'll be okay. Now I think they look at it as, we need guys to generate some turnovers. If we generate a couple turnovers, our offense is humming now. It's so good. The other team has no shot, even if we give up a 50-yard bomb. And we saw them give up a bunch last year. They led the league in deep passing plays allowed. I think they're looking at safety. Like, we want guys that are instinctive, that can make turnovers, rather than guys that don't get turnovers but don't give up the big play. What do you think?
I think that's like fair, because you look at, the production that Hufanga and both Jair Brown had on the ball. I do think, and even Tashawn Gibson, right? Tashawn Gibson, look, he's an older player now. I know he had a really nice resurgent season last year, but Tashawn Gibson has been a long time starting safety and a pretty good one in the NFL for a long time. He has 30 plus career interceptions. So he's been no slouch before he got to San Francisco. He's been a good player. So I think you're absolutely bang on when you just look at the ball production of the different safeties they have. But I don't know if that was the number one draw to Jair Brown. I think the number one draw to Jair Brown is the same draw that it was to Jaquiski Tartt and Jimmy Ward when they were the two safeties who didn't have the quote-unquote ball production, because they simply didn't. Although Jimmy Ward did show last year, when you throw him the ball, he can catch it too.
When he was at nickel.
Right. So, I mean, yes, but I think the number one thing with Jair Brown was that you got to see him line up everywhere. You saw snaps that showed he was capable of playing in the post, and he had the fluidity in his hips to be able to transition from sideline to sideline. He had real snaps in the slot, which is not something you always see from safeties, and he had good ones too. So that's another thing you can throw in. I think your point is absolutely right, Rob, but I don't think it was the main draw to Jair Brown. I still think positional versatility, which is the main draw to Jaquiski Tartt, which is the biggest plus to Jimmy Ward, was Jair Brown's biggest plus as well. And by the way, while we're on the topic of Jair Brown, I think Jair Brown's a day one starter for sure. I do. I think he's capable of starting day one 100%. And I think, how we saw Talanoa Hufanga play a lot as a rookie in 3 safety defenses? I think we're going to see that a lot with Steve Wilks. I think Jair Brown is going to play a lot of snaps as a rookie, whether it's special teams, whether it's playing in the slot. He's going to play a lot, because I don't think they're going to keep him off the field. He is. If he ran 4.5 or 4.4, Rob, I saw Daniel Jeremiah say it, and I 100% agree with it. He wouldn't have been there at 90, whatever, 94, 95. When did they pick him? 89?
Whenever the hell it was.
Yeah, whatever.
By the way, if you missed, I thought this was so cool. Marvin49, YouTube user Marvin49, did a super cut of all of the 49ers draft picks from all 3 draft broadcasts. He smashed them all together. So if you missed any of the draft, maybe you didn't want to lock into that 6th or 7th round, go check that out. We tweeted it out from our handle on Twitter at GS Podcast. The link right to his video.
He does it for every draft. He's done it since 2011. I am an avid watcher of Marvin 49's YouTube channel. I've interacted with him a little bit on Twitter. Very nice guy. What he does is God's work when he puts every single thing. Because sometimes, you watch the NFL Network and you flip over to the ESPN and you catch the end of it and it goes to the next pick. The fact that he posts it every time, I love listening to it. Sometimes, when I need to feel a little bit better, I go back and listen to Mike Mayock talking about the young pup that is Aldon Smith.
Jeez.
Or, in 2018, Mike Mayock talking about, Mike McGlinchey's Philly roots and how he's a Philadelphia kid, and Mayock's from Philadelphia as well, and all of that. I love that entire thing, and I really appreciate Marvin49 for posting it year after year. It's awesome.
So, yeah, go and check that out. And I actually thought that Jair Brown got a little overlooked because the kicker happened. And so everyone, that's all they talked about with the Niners day one draft was the kicker. And it's like, hey, we may have gotten a stud at safety. I'd love to see him. You know me. Draft him, early round draft pick, throw him in. Just get into the pool. You'll learn to swim or you'll drown. But one way or another, we'll figure it out. So that was a bad analogy. I shouldn't have said that given what happened in Tampa Bay. I apologize. That was a bad choice of words by me. I didn't think that through, and I apologize.
Fair enough. Here's one thing I'll say that I noticed. They're staying away from 1-year production, guys, it feels like. They're looking for
except the
guys with
quarterback.
right. Well, I'm getting there, Rob.
Sorry.
It feels like they're going for guys with multiple years of production, right? Jair Brown was a 2-year productive player at Penn State, a hell of a player for 2 years at Penn State. They're looking for guys who have that, not just 1 year of production. Because, I mean, you look at their worst picks, right? Solomon Thomas, what did he have?
1 year production.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more names I could go, but I don't want to name them, so we'll stop there.
I agree. And, we'll find out. I'm excited. I think that people are too worried about the kicker, and just step back and look at the draft as a whole. I'll throw it up one more time before we go. There's things to like about every single player. The Robert Beal pick, they talked about the GTFO, which apparently I guess is Chris Kaceric's thing that he rates everybody in the draft on as GTFO, and Robert Beal had the highest in the entire draft. So that's hopefully good. I don't know. But, I think that a lot of people were just down on the draft in general because they didn't have a day one pick. And so it's hard to get excited about that, but that doesn't mean you can't get good players. Don't worry about what draft grade the 49ers get this week. Like, put that out of your mind. That doesn't have any actual effect on how good these guys are.
Beal is the most interesting pick, right? Because he's the guy that's the 5-star recruit that if you look at like his body and all of that, that guy looks like a first-round pick for sure. Like, he'll be the first guy coming off the bus for the Niners for sure. He's chiseled. But he obviously, it's tough to play in that defense. First of all, it's tough to be an edge player in that defense. I think it was talked about a little bit, maybe not enough with Trayvon Walker coming out. They have their edge players read a lot. So it's not just what the Niners do, which is, hey, put your hand in the dirt and see quarterback, get quarterback. It's a little bit more. Sometimes you have to two gap. Sometimes you have to be accountable for certain things in the run game. And so he obviously wasn't a fit for that, because I thought Kirby Smart telling John Lynch what he told him was kind of a shot at Robert Beal's lack of ability to play for them. Because he was saying, if you just have him get the quarterback, he can be good, which is to say, well, he wasn't good for us because, we had him do a little bit more than that. But like, the Georgia defense was obviously loaded, so it's really hard for anybody to get on the field, because I thought somebody retweeted Daniel Jeremiah's tweet from October of 2021, which is one of my favorite tweets of all time. He said, just caught up on watching the Georgia defense, draft them. Draft all of them, which is like, yeah, they're all like friggin' amazing.
And
they're
then
all
the Eagles
ridiculous. Did. Yeah, well, I mean, dude, I've watched so many snaps of the Georgia defense in the last 2 years just because I've had to, because of this process, and they're really all ridiculous. But he's the guy with boom bust potential, right? Because we kind of don't have a lot of information. He has elite traits, so we think if you put him with elite coaching, he has the opportunity to become something special. But then he's also a guy with very limited playing time and production, which we've seen that story before too, in the development of guys with that as well.
Yeah, but that's a swing I'm okay with taking in the 5th round.
Oh, like, 100%.
I don't want a high floor guy in the 5th round. Give me the guy that you could potentially hit a home run, because those are the guys that change the trajectory of your franchise. Getting Richard Sherman in the 5th round, getting George Kittle in the 5th round, elite production on rookie contracts makes a massive, massive difference to the team. 49ers are obsessed with that at quarterback, for example. So take the swing in the 5th round on that.
Someone's asking about Joey Fisher. I see so much Joey Fisher stuff.
Oh, the undrafted free agent.
Oh, look, I'm going to refrain from talking about Joey Fisher, Rob. I don't know about you. Remember when everybody told us that the Niners should draft Donovan Smith at 61, and then they stole Donovan Smith as an undrafted free agent, and now Donovan Smith is the center for the Vegas Vipers in the XFL. So I'm going to wait till I see Joey Fisher play for the 49ers. I don't have Shepard film. I'm also not informed when it comes to looking at offensive tackles, so I'm not going to even get involved in that. But I'm not going to do this thing where we hype up an undrafted free agent because some draft evaluators said Donovan Smith was projected to be a 2nd to 4th round pick. Talk about somebody that, I mean, he's on the Vegas Vipers. I don't know what else to tell you there. So I'm not going to do the same thing with Joey Fisher. I know a lot of people will. I'm not planning to participate in that one.
I totally respect that, but I don't respect the fact that you didn't read the username, because Shacky Chan is one of the best usernames of all time. That's the person that submitted that comment. Thank you, Shacky Chan, watching on my Twitch page at Stats on Fire. Carlos says Joey Fisher was a 3rd round mock by Mel Kiper. So there's the comment you were just referencing, Vish. Yes, he was a 3rd round mock, but it doesn't mean, again, that he can play. That's going to do it for this edition of the show.
Remember when Matt Barkley was a first-round mark by Mel Kiper?
Yeah, Mel's had some. Jimmy Clausen. Mel's not even supposed to be doing it anymore because he said he would retire if Jimmy Clausen wasn't a good player, technically.
I think Mel Kiper's awesome. I think what
he
he's
is
done
awesome
for the draft is like incredible. And I love watching Mel Kiper like go through his 2 years production, blah, 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 blah. When he just starts rattling off everything, I think it's so impressive what he does for the draft. But we got to stop because Mel Kiper says this guy is this, that this guy is actually this. I think sometimes the draft plays out very differently than what Mel Kiper tells you throughout the year the draft is going to be, right? That's why DJ Hayden, all of a sudden, everybody moves DJ Hayden from a second or third round pick to, he's going to go in the top 15. Happened with Bruce Irvin too. Remember? Bruce Irvin from West Virginia. It happens with a lot of different players when the NFL gets in and they tell you, hey, these guys are actually good. These guys aren't. A lot of things change.
Yeah, I mean, look, nobody bats 1,000, and Mel is awesome. I love Mel. He's not always right, and that's not a knock on him. That's everybody. I will tell you really quick before we go, having worked with Mel at ESPN for years, off the air, he is exactly like that. Like that's not an act or like he doesn't just get up when the recording light goes on. Like literally I would be like about to record a show with him. Hey, Mel, can you hear me? Is everything good? Everything working? You have the rundown. Hey, Mel, by the way, I heard the 49ers might draft this guy in the 5th round. He'd be like, oh, well, Jonathan Smith, he's got a good 40-time long arms. Like that's literally how he is. He's locked in all the time. It's awesome.
That's incredible. That is awesome.
Yes, that is how he is. Also, another weird Mel Kiper Jr. fact, and this could have changed since I left there because I left ESPN in 2012. Although if you saw my Twitter, you'll know that I will be back at ESPN this weekend hosting game night on ESPN Radio. So I'm super excited about that.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. But one weird thing about Mel Kiper when I was there, he had never in his life used an ATM.
Wow. So he's just a credit guy?
I don't know if he's just a straight cash homie guy like Randy Moss or, if his wife handles like going to the ATM and getting all the money out of the bank. But last I knew, Mel Kiper had never used an ATM, which is just wild. He's too busy doing draft prep. He didn't have time to go to the bank.
Incredible. By the way, your impersonation of him was spot on. When you started talking about the arm length and 40 times, that was a little Frank Caliendo-esque.
There you go. See, look, I'm multi-talented. No, everybody, it's like a Christopher Walken. Like everybody can try and do a Mel or a Christopher Walken or something like that. It's, he's been around forever. Exactly. He's iconic.
I will say, I do miss him being more critical. I feel like now he just kind of gives the information and he's nice, but I didn't ever get to watch the draft. I've only seen the clips of him saying, that's why the Indianapolis Colts are picking at the top of the draft every year. That's awesome TV, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe he didn't like the whole response to that, or maybe, in his old age, he's a little more gentle to some of these guys. I shouldn't say old age, older age. Did you see the homage shirt that they've just put out? Who in the hell is Mel Kiper? You can buy that shirt at homage.com. It is awesome. I kind of want it. You can go there to actually click the link right in the description to this show. It'll take you right there. You can go and buy it. All right, Vish. For the third time, I'm going to try and end the show. Thanks, everybody, for hopping in. If you missed at the top of the show, by the way, we just announced YouTube memberships for the Gold Standard Podcast Network channel. $2.99 a month. You'll get priority response. You'll get emojis, membership badges. We'll acknowledge you at the beginning of every show. So please hurry up and sign up for that because I need a job and need money. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your month.